In the quiet, peaceful town of Pine Hill, the shocking murder of Jennifer Johnson shook everyone. The town, known for its peaceful and close-knit community, was shattered by a crime that revealed dark secrets hidden behind seemingly perfect lives. Two couples, Daniel and Linda Garner and Mark and Jennifer Johnson, were caught in a web of obsession, deceit, and ultimately murder. Daniel Garner was a respected architect with a charming personality and seemingly perfect marriage to Linda, a dedicated school teacher. Mark Johnson, a successful financial advisor, and his wife Jennifer were the Garners' closest friends. Besides neighborhood barbecues and weekend getaways, the two couples also engaged in a consensual wife-swapping arrangements. At first, this brought excitement and novelty for their lives. However, underneath the surface, dangerous emotions were growing. Daniel's fascination with Jennifer turned into an all-consuming obsession. Sensing this, Jennifer decided to end the arrangement, unaware of the deadly consequences. Daniel and Linda Garner had been married for 10 years and seemed to have a stable and happy marriage. Daniel was known for his innovative architectural designs, and Linda was a beloved third-grade teacher. They lived in a charming house on Maple Street with a well-tended garden. Mark and Jennifer Johnson had moved to Pine Hill 5 years ago and quickly became friends with the Garners. Mark was outgoing, popular, and Jennifer was strikingly beautiful and magnetic. Their friendship with the Garners grew over shared interests and mutual respect. The idea of wife swapping came up during a dinner party at the Garners' home. Fueled by wine and curiosity, they discussed open relationships. Surprisingly, everyone was open to the idea. Over the next few weeks, they agreed on boundaries and rules to protect their marriages. The first encounter was awkward but exciting, and as soon as it became a regular part of their lives, adding a spark to both marriages, initially it seemed to work well. Both couples appeared happier and more connected. They maintained their social activities and kept their secrets carefully guarded. However, over time, Daniel's behavior started to change. He showed an unusual amount of interest in Jennifer, often finding reasons to spend time alone with her. Linda noticed his increasing preoccupation but chose to ignore it, hoping it was just a phase. Mark, too, seemed oblivious to the growing tension. Daniel's fascination with Jennifer deepened. He thought about her constantly and craved more time with her. What started as a harmless adventure turned into an obsession with devastating consequences. Daniel's obsession with Jennifer grew. He thought about her every day, even during work and family dinners. His architectural projects, once his passion, now seemed secondary to his desire for Jennifer. He found ways to be near her, volunteering to help with tasks or inviting the Johnsons over more frequently. Linda noticed the change in her husband. At first, she attributed it to their new lifestyle's excitement, but soon it became clear that Daniel's interest in Jennifer went beyond their agreement. He became irritable and distant when they weren't with the Johnsons, and his conversations often veered towards Jennifer. One evening, while cleaning up after a dinner party, Linda confronted Daniel. He reached defensively, dismissing her concerns as jealousy. Linda, not wanting to disrupt their delicate balance, let it go, but kept a closer eye on him. Her suspicions grew when she saw him staring at Jennifer during gatherings. Jennifer, too, began to sense Daniel's growing obsession. Initially flattered, she soon found it uncomfortable. His touches became more possessive and his words more intimate. She discussed her discomfort with Mark, who brushed it off, believing Daniel was just being more expressive. The turning point came during a weekend trip to a lakeside cabin. The couples planned the gateway to reconnect and relax. However, the trip highlighted Daniel's fixation. He monopolized Jennifer's time. The tension was so obvious, and Jennifer's attempt to distance herself was subtly resisted by Daniel. One night, while sitting by the fire, Daniel made a comment about leaving everything behind and starting fresh with just the two of them. Jennifer, shocked and unsettled, excused herself and went to bed early. Linda, who overheard the conversation, confronted Daniel again. This time, he was less dismissive, but still refused to acknowledge his feelings. Linda's frustration grew as she realized the extent of Daniel's obsession. She loved her husband, but knew his infatuation with Jennifer could destroy their marriage and their friendship with the Johnsons. Despite her efforts to intervene, Daniel's behavior became more erratic. He started to follow Jennifer outside their arranged meetings, showing up at her yoga classes and her workplace. Jennifer's unease turned to fear. She confided in a close friend who advised her to distance herself from Daniel as much as possible. Determined to take control, Jennifer decided to end the arrangement altogether. She hoped that by doing so, Daniel would come to his senses. One evening, while Mark was away on a business trip, Daniel showed up at the Johnsons' house unannounced. Jennifer was taken aback, but let him in. Hoping to avoid a scene, they sat in the living room, the air thick with tension. Daniel confessed his feelings for her, speaking of a future where they could be together. Jennifer, horrified, tried to reason with him, explaining that their arrangement was never meant to be more than a temporary excitement. As Daniel's declaration became more intense, Jennifer's fear turned into anger. She realized she needs to put an end to this before it destroyed her marriage and her friendship with Linda. She told Daniel firmly that their arrangement was over and that he needed to respect her boundaries. Daniel, visibly shaken, tried to persuade her to reconsider, but Jennifer stood her ground. Over the next few days, Jennifer avoided Daniel, hoping he would come to his senses. She confided in Linda, who listened with a heavy heart. Linda knew her husband's obsession had gone too far, and while she wanted to support Jennifer, she also felt a twisted loyalty to Daniel. She promised Jennifer she would talk to him, hoping to defuse the situation. However, Daniel's obsession only deepened. He started showing up at Jennifer's work, waiting for her after hours, and leaving her messages, expressing his love. Jennifer, feeling increasingly unsafe, decided to confront him one last time, hoping to make him understand. They met at a secluded park. Jennifer reiterated that their arrangement was over and his behavior was unacceptable. She pleaded with him to let go and move on. Daniel, unable to accept her rejection, grew desperate. He accused her of leading him on and playing with his emotions. Jennifer, maintaining her composure, insisted that they part ways. Unbeknown to them, Linda has followed Daniel to the park. She watched from a distance, her heart pounding as the confrontation unfolded. She saw the anguish on Daniel's face and the determination on Jennifer's. Linda knew this confrontation was inevitable, but feared what might happen next. As the argument escalated, Daniel's desperation turned to anger. Jennifer's refusal to entertain his fantasies felt like a personal betrayal. He lashed out verbally, calling her names and accusing her of ruining his life. Jennifer, holding back tears, stood her ground, refusing to be intimidated. Linda, watching from the shadows, felt a surge of panic. She knew she had to intervene before things got out of hand. She stepped out and approached them, her voice shaking as she called out to Daniel. The sight of Linda seemed to snap Daniel out of his rage, and he turned to her, his expression a mix of confusion and relief. Jennifer, taking advantage of the distraction, walked away, determined to put as much distance between herself and Daniel as possible. Linda, now alone with her husband, tried to calm him down, reassuring him that they would find a way to move past this, but she knew their lives had been forever changed. The affair had reached to a breaking point, and Jennifer's decision to end it set off a chain of events that couldn't be undone. As things settled, Daniel's obsession and Linda's involvement would soon come to light, leading to a tragic and violent end. The confrontation at the park left Daniel in turmoil. Jennifer's firm rejection and Linda's unexpected appearance shook him deeply. He went home that night, his mind a mess of anger, betrayal and despair. Linda, sensing his turmoil, tried to comfort him. Daniel remained uncontrollable. Over the next few days, Daniel's behavior became increasingly erratic. He alternated between intense anger and deep sadness. He stopped going to work, spending his days obsessing over Jennifer's rejection and the perceived injustice he had suffered. Linda, unable to reach him, felt her own frustration and fear growing. She knew something had to change, but she wasn't prepared for what would happen next. Jennifer, determined to move forward, avoided all contact with Daniel. She focused on her work and her relationship with Mark. She hadn't told her husband the full intent of Daniel's obsession, fearing his reaction and the fallout. She hoped that by cutting ties, Daniel would eventually accept the end of their affair and leave her alone. One evening, Jennifer returned home from work to find Daniel waiting for her outside her house. Her heart sank at the sight of him, and she steeled herself for another confrontation. She approached him cautiously, her voice steady but firm, and told him to leave. Daniel, his eyes wild with desperation, begged her for one last chance to explain himself. Jennifer, sensing the futility of the conversation, tried to walk past him, but Daniel grabbed her arm. His grip was tight and painful. Jennifer could see the madness in his eyes. She struggled to break free, her voice rising as she demanded he let go. The noise attracted the attention of a neighbor, who stepped outside to see what was happening. Seeing the neighbor, Daniel released Jennifer and fled. Jennifer, shaken and frightened, thanked the neighbor and hurried inside. She called Linda, hoping to find a way to resolve the situation without involving the police. Linda, hearing the fear in Jennifer's voice, agreed to meet with her the next day to discuss how to handle Daniel's increasingly unstable behavior. The next day, Linda met Jennifer at a local cafe. Jennifer, looking exhausted and tense, explained the encounter with Daniel and her growing fear for her safety. Linda listened intently, her mind racing as she tried to formulate a plan. She promised Jennifer that she would talk to Daniel and make him understand that their relationship was over. After the meeting, Linda returned home to find Daniel in a state of agitation. She confronted him about the incident with Jennifer, her voice a mix of anger and concern. Daniel, feeling concerned, lashed out at her, accusing her of taking Jennifer's side and betraying him. The argument escalated, and Linda, fearing her own safety, retreated to the bedroom. That night, Daniel's thoughts turned darker. He couldn't accept that Jennifer had rejected him and that his own wife was against him. In his twisted mind, he believed that the only way to resolve the situation was to eliminate the source of his pain. He decided that if he couldn't have Jennifer, no one can. On a cold, clear night, Daniel made his way to the Johnsons' house. He knew Mark was out of town, leaving Jennifer alone. He broke in through a side window and made his way to the bedroom where Jennifer lay sleeping. The sight of her, peaceful and unaware, fueled his rage and desperation. He grabbed a kitchen knife and approached her, his mind filled with a chaotic mix of love and hatred. Jennifer awoke to the sight of Daniel standing over her, the knife gleaming in the dim light. She tried to scream, but Daniel covered her mouth, his grip strong and unyielding in a fit of rage. He plunged the knife into her chest, silencing her cries. As Jennifer's life slipped away, Daniel stood over her, his mind a haze of conflicting emotions. In the aftermath of the murder, Daniel fled the scene, his hands stained with Jennifer's blood. He returned home where Linda found him trembling and incoherent. She realized immediately what he had done. In a moment of twisted loyalty, decided to help him cover up the crime. The life they had built, the secrets they had kept, were all at stake. Linda knew that if they were to survive, they needed to act quickly and decisively. Linda, driven by a twisted sense of loyalty and self-preservation quickly took control of the situation. She led Daniel to the bathroom, instructing him to remove his clothes and wash off the blood. Her mind raced with the urgency of the predicament. She knew they had to act fast to cover up the crime and protect their secret life. As Daniel stood under the hot shower, the water turning pink around his feet, Linda gathered his clothes and placed them in a plastic bag. She scrubbed the floor where he had walked, making sure to eliminate any trace of blood. Once Daniel was cleaned up, she sat him down and forced him to recount every detail of what had happened. Despite his emotional state, Daniel managed to provide a coherent account, his voice shaking with the weight of his actions. Linda devised a plan. They needed to create an alibi and dispose of any evidence linking them to the crime. She called a trusted friend, claiming that Daniel had been with her all evening, ensuring their alibi was backed up. Then she drove to a secluded area outside of town where she burnt Daniel's blood-stained clothes and the murder weapon, praying that the fire would consume any remaining evidence. The police questioned everyone in the neighborhood, including the Garners. Linda's carefully crafted alibi held up under scrutiny, and Daniel, although visibly distressed, managed to avoid raising suspicion. The investigation seemed to stall with no concrete evidence pointing to the Garners. Despite their initial success in evading the authorities, the psychological toll of the murder weighed heavily on both Daniel and Linda. Daniel became increasingly paranoid, convinced that the police were closing in on him. He withdrew from friends and colleagues, isolating himself in a web of fear and regret. Linda, while outwardly composed, felt the strain of their secret pressing down on her. She became hypervigilant, scrutinizing every interaction and behavior for signs of suspicion from those around them. The weeks following Jennifer's murder were a blur of tension and deception from the Garners. Linda took on the role of the stabilizer, managing Daniel's paranoia while ensuring their public facade remained intact. She monitored the news for any updates on the investigation, relieved that the police seemed to have no solid leads. However, Linda knew that maintaining their cover required more than just an alibi. They needed to create a narrative that would divert attention away from Daniel. She suggested to Daniel that he should appear more distraught over Jennifer's death, to align with the community's grief and to throw off any suspicion. At social gatherings and community meetings, Daniel played the part of the grieving friend. He spoke of Jennifer with a mix of fondness and sorrow, his eyes often welling up with tears. Mark, devastated and desperate for answers, seemed to appreciate Daniel's empathy, never suspecting his friend's involvement in his wife's death. Daniel's mental state deteriorated further, his guilt manifesting in nightmares and hallucinations. He started drinking heavily, seeking solace in alcohol and finding only temporary escape. Linda, fearing he might confess in a drunken stupor, kept a close eye on him, often staying up late to ensure he didn't leave the house. One evening, as Daniel sat slumped over a glass of whiskey, he broke down. He confessed to Linda that he couldn't live with the guilt any longer, that he needed to come clean. Linda panicked and tried to calm him down to help maintain their composure. Linda suggested they take a short trip out of town. They traveled to a secluded cabin in the mountains, hoping the change of scenery would help Daniel regain some semblance of peace. The isolation provided a temporary respite, allowing them to plan their next steps without the constant pressure of the investigation looming over them. During their time at the cabin, Linda reinforced the importance of their secrecy. She coached Daniel on how to handle police questionings and public interaction, drilling him until he could respond without hesitation. Linda's determination to protect their lifestyle and avoid imprisonment fueled her relentless drive to keep their story straight. Upon returning to Pine Hill, the Garners resumed their lives with a renewed sense of purpose. Daniel, though still haunted by his actions, managed to present a more stable front. Linda continued to manage their interactions with the community, ensuring they remained above suspicion. However, the cracks in their facade were beginning to show. Friends and neighbors noticed Daniel's increased drinking and erratic behavior, and whispers of his possible involvement in Jennifer's death began to circulate. Linda, ever vigilant, worked to quash the rumors, but she knew their time was running out. As the police investigation continued, new evidence came to light pointing towards the inconsistencies in Daniel's alibi. The Garner's carefully constructed world was on the brink of collapse, and the truth was closer to being revealed than ever before. Detective Mitchell interviewed the Garners separately, noting any discrepancies in their stories. Linda's carefully crafted alibi held up under scrutiny, and Daniel's emotional state seemed consistent with that of a grieving friend. However, Mitchell's instincts told her that there was more to the story. As the weeks passed, new evidence emerged. Forensic analysis of Jennifer's phone records revealed a series of increasingly desperate text messages from Daniel, indicating his obsessions with her. Mitchell brought Daniel in for further questioning and pressing him on his relationship with Jennifer and the nature of their final interactions. Daniel, unable to maintain his composure, broke down and confessed to the murder. He detailed his obsession with Jennifer, his anger at her rejection, and the fateful night he took her life. Linda, upon hearing of Daniel's confession, realized the full extent of their situation. She was arrested shortly after, charged with aiding and abetting her husband's crime and obstruction of justice. The trial was a media sensation, with the community of Pine Hill reeling from the shocking revelations. Daniel, overwhelmed by guilt, pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison. Linda, while maintaining her innocence regarding her knowledge of the murder, was found guilty of obstruction and received a lengthy prison sentence. Mark, devastated by the loss of his wife and the betrayal of his friends, struggled to rebuild his life. The Garner's fall from grace served as a chilling reminder of the consequences of obsession and the lengths to which people would go to protect their secrets. Now, my opinion on the story, which you don't have to watch, but I think this is absolutely crazy. How come lovers go to that far? I mean, obsessing over a female is okay if you love her, but going to these extents is crazy to me. I mean, I don't imagine myself loving a female that much. I mean, there's plenty in the world to love and care for, and maybe going back to your old partners and being double swingers is not a very great idea. I mean, I could never imagine having two different females talking to me at the same time. I feel like I would just end up doing the crime to myself. That's enough hate or love. Make sure you guys subscribe to Crime Time for more crime stories.